Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is episode 009, and this is about private yoga with Kate Connell Potts. Hello, this is Stephanie Cunningham, and we are welcoming Kate Connell Potts to our podcast today. Kate has a private yoga practice, and she's going to talk on one-to-one teaching, and she's also taught group and corporate classes and co-owns a yoga studio. She has developed a course.
Thanks so much for having me today.
You're welcome. She's also developed a course and a book on teaching private yoga, and has taught numerous teachers around the world the basics of building a sustainable, and that's the clue, sustainable private yoga practice. So welcome, Kate. And why don't we start off? What is the attraction for a yoga teacher for a private yoga practice?
Yes, I love this question, and I think it's a perfect place to start because I think there's a lot of people who are curious about private yoga lessons, and that stems from not only feeling like that's one of the main ways to make a sustainable income in the yoga business, but also we are really tapped into this idea that one-on-one work can go deeper in some different aspects than we can in group classes. And so I think people get really curious about that. In addition to the fact that the origins of yoga do stem very much in a teacher to student discipline. So it organically comes back full circle, I think, to a curiosity around working individually with our clients.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to mention that this really is where we started with yoga, isn't it? Just one teacher and one student. And it's changed slightly since then.
It has, certainly.
What is the attraction of private yoga for the student, for the yoga student?
I think a lot of the same. I think that in modern times, especially since we kind of alluded to that, I think that there's a lot of fastness that's happened, and we even have seen that, I think, in the yoga industry as we've moved away from the one-on-one model, and what yoga seems like the norm is now is this group setting and this bigger kind of dynamic shifting towards one-to-many. And so I think some people want to get back to the origin of learning individually in a way that feels catered to them and customized to them as their lives get busier. They want something that's super potent and customized and exactly what they need, so that way they're able to fulfill their other roles and responsibilities. And I think it also stems from wanting to really be seen. And I think that's one of the biggest things we can do as yoga teachers that work privately, is that we can really build a framework in which we're able to assess what the person in front of us needs and wants, and then we're able to use the tools at our disposal through yoga and through meditation to then deliver that and give them some tangible benefit that they not only see on their mat, but then the ramifications of their practice that happens and shows up in other facets of their life.
Okay. I can see that, because so it would be much more a personalized practice for their particular issues. So that gets us into assessment. And you say that in your course, you teach how to assess a student that walks in, I assume. What kinds of things do you recommend that a teacher do when they get a new student?
Yes. So I like to break down the first part of how we gather information during a new client kind of session or process. Assessment is one of the things that I talk about, and the other one is called intake. So an intake is really all about understanding who this person is, what their lifestyle looks like, and essentially in their own words, so not using the body here as any gauge or any measurement, but in their own words, what they feel like is out of balance or where they're looking to grow and flourish through their yoga practice. The intake portion is all conversational. So I like to have people move through a conversation with the person that they're going to be working with in a way that really highlights, again, what their model day looks like, what kind of objectives and goals they have, not just physically, but how they want to feel, how they want to interact with the world around them, how, they want to really be showing up in all facets of their life in a holistic way. And then from there, I think that finding out in their own words how they would describe their lack of or necessity, want to improve upon any part of their physicality or their spiritual practice or their emotional balance, in their own words, what that sounds like and what that looks like. And then that becomes a really great gateway for the assessment. And the assessment is all about measuring the physical side of what's going on in their body. So somebody may say that they're really looking to build upper body strength, for instance. But then as we move out of the intake and them saying that, and we move into the assessment, which is all about seeing how they actually can move on the mat and taking them through postures that are going to assess range of motion, but also a general idea of how they're able to move in relationship to their different body awareness and spatial awareness, in addition to how they're able to connect breath to movement. And some of these things we're going to just be noticing, like their structure and their ability to stand and balance and transition from standing to seated and vice versa, then that's going to give us a lot of context clues and more information beyond just what they're saying their goal is. So we might uncover that their goal might be to build upper body strength, but we're also noticing some other fundamental things that we need to address in order to get them success on that goal that they've outlined. And so these two things together, gathering information based on conversation and then gathering information based on that physical assessment of seeing what's really going on for them, is going to paint a holistic picture for us as a teacher of where we start and then where we continue as we outline a plan with that client's needs in mind.
Okay. So this plan that you put together, is this what, say, that you're going to work with the individual student on, or is this a plan that also includes them doing some work outside of the class between the two of you?
Yes. So I think it includes both. And I think I have a little bit of a different take on private yoga than some other people who might be talking about what private yoga lessons look like. But I really feel like as teachers, our ultimate goal is creating sustainable practitioners. And I think that when we're helping people create a lifelong practice, then there are benefits for us as the teacher to be guiding somebody along that path. But I also think that that is the ultimate way in which we should be moving, which is why I became so passionate about teaching private yoga. I wasn't seeing a lot of ways for me to establish long-term building blocks for people in group classes, but I knew that through one-on-one work, I could help them create the physical space in their home and teach them how to use blocks and teach them how to use different things and customize their practice to their needs, and also educate them around sensation of the body and what was happening and unfolding. So for me and for people that I teach, I think that including additional support in order to help them create a home practice and a long-term practice that you then expect them to be investing their additional time and energy and effort in is a really paramount part of the private yoga teaching relationship. So I think this comes up in many ways. I think that it's a expectation that you set before somebody's even signed on to work with you, because I think if you are really looking to just teach people yoga in a way that is one-to-one, and maybe this is you're going to be bringing yoga to them and teaching them in their workplace, or kind of doing pop-up classes periodically for them to teach them how to modify certain things temporarily. That is still a way to build a yoga business around one-on-one work, but it's going to look very different than what it would look like if you were helping people create long-term practices, and then as a result, expecting them as part of that agreement to do homework and to have customized sequences that they are then taking and practicing on their own. So it's both. I think it's setting a long-term plan for the sessions that you will have with them face-to-face, or now in these days, I guess it's not just face-to-face. It could also be via Skype or Google Hangouts or anything digital as well. But then also what that's going to look like in terms of the tangible and the plan-based way you're going to help them create a practice of their own. And that can be anywhere from 5 minutes of meditation that they're going to work up to, every other day, to an expansive practice where you're really going to help them understand some ebb and flow from the practice, and long term, maybe only see them once every couple of months to tweak their particular sequence based on what's going on in their body and what has evolved and changed as a result of their practice and a result of their lifestyle.
Okay. Well, that sounds really interesting. I agree with you. I have small classes because I teach seniors, but still trying to get beyond the mat is very difficult. And that sounds rather exciting to actually be able to work with someone that closely, shall we say. So I really love this statement in your website, which was, you said you have continually invested in yourself, your business, and your yoga education. Do you believe that is an expectation for yoga teachers to do all three of those?
Yes. Oh, that's such a great question. So I think that, and the work that I do skews a lot towards these days more towards the business side. So the three that I mentioned were work on self, work on teaching, so your expertise as a teacher, and then also being a entrepreneur, understanding business and enriching your understanding and awareness. And the most important part is the implementation of what you learn. And I think that, no, I don't think that is the expectation in the modern yoga world. I think the expectation is, first and foremost, to actually invest in your ability to teach really well. And so what I think suffers is the investment of time and money and education and effort as self-practitioners, and then also as entrepreneurs. And I think that is why the modern world of yoga looks like it does, where we're having kind of a little bit of a crisis, I would even say, of people loving the work that they're doing, but feeling like they can't make it sustainable because they're not spending time equally in those three areas. They're spending time thinking that investing all of those things in a weekend workshop to help them do, X type of yoga teaching skill is going to then translate into them being a better practitioner, a more mindful yogi / a better business person, because they think if they know how to teach yoga nidra, they're going to get their next workshop filled up. Or if they're better at adjusting, then they are going to be able to fill their upcoming retreat and things like that. So I think that expectation is not that, but I think the key is that, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I'm an absolutely perfect example of this in that I've, spent lots of money on my yoga teaching, a little bit of money on me, and until the last year or so, nothing on my business. And
yes, I think that is really common. And I don't think it's because haven't learned. I think it's because we haven't learned anything else. I think we get into our 200-hour to start, and we're so just immersed in this. And I know that I felt really strongly connected to my yoga practice at that time, but I also finished up feeling like there was such this big, broad sea of things to learn. And when your passion is what you love, but it's also the work that you do, it can get really easy to fall into that habit. So I think it's a common thing.
Yeah, I do too. But I think it's really important what you've said here, because I think a lot of us went into teaching and really wanted it to be sustainable. We really wanted it to be our life's work. And yet we don't, I don't think in general, perhaps some places you don't really get anything else other than how to be a teacher, where you really truly need that business expertise too in some way. And I think it's really important to say this isn't enough, that you need more. If you truly want to be sustainable, if you want this to be your life's work. If you don't, if you want it to be a hobby or you just want to do 1 or 2 classes, that's cool. But I think that's a really important statement, and I want to emphasize that for everybody on the podcast. The other thing that this kind of wanders into is, when I've talked to lots of teachers on the podcast, they've talked about teacher training and what it should be and what it shouldn't be. And so I kind of get from you, and I could be wrong, so please tell me if I am, that really the basic training is great, but that you then have to take it further and invest in yourself in several ways.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that just the scope of a 200-hour is it's I think that the framework of the yoga industry has changed. That I think previously, stepping into a 200-hour, I think 200 hours looked different. I think that people were stepping into teacher training with a base of some kind already. So they had been practitioners for years prior. They had a framework and an understanding, even if it was just kind of the basic framework and the inner workings of the philosophy around yoga, and they knew postures, they knew their body in those postures. So I think a lot of the links were already connected. I think that meant then that 200 hours could go quite a bit more depth based. People could get more of a complete picture. And I think that's shifted. I think as yoga has become more mainstream, we're seeing more people jump into 200 hours that maybe have less yoga experience under their belt, or if they have been practitioners, it's been a little bit more of kind of at a drop-in rate where they're not sustainably working on a home practice yet. That's a daily practice, and it's more kind of dropping into different teachers' classes. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, but I think what we've seen happen then in 200 hours is that we're actually really using 200 hours as a continuing education for the yoga practitioner more than we're seeing a 200-hour as a foundational training for the yoga educator. And that's what it looks like then in a lot of these 200-hour trainings, that we're teaching people some of the foundational things that in years past, I mean, even 5 years ago, people probably already came into teacher training knowing. They would know some of the basic, framework, and they knew the choreography already of sun salutations and things that maybe they're coming into now not knowing. And so it's changed the framework and the landscape of what 200 hours look like. And that, in effect, has changed what people are able to come out of those trainings with knowledge and awareness and practice of doing. But even if that wasn't the case, even if we were still in a place previously where people were coming out with 200 hours, I think that the hobbyist kind of mentality of being in the yoga business has meant that there's not as much of a quick learning curve. There was a really quick learning curve for me because I came out of my 200-hour and went right into teaching full time. I graduated from college the same weekend that I graduated my yoga teacher training. And so it was the perfect time for me to literally just jump in and give it a try. I didn't have a job that I had to step away from. I didn't have a reliable income to step away from. I didn't have a family, and some of these things that we really do have to consider as we become more householder yogis and modern yoga teachers and entrepreneurs. So because of that, I think I learned really quickly. I was in front of a lot of bodies. I was teaching a ton of classes in a variety of settings. But for a lot of us, we're teaching one time a week after our 200 hour. So it's a slow buildup. And during that time, we're starting to realize the gaps in our knowledge from our 200 hour and from our time on the mat. And we're noticing different things. And then business tends to come later if we stick around long enough to really say, you know, I want to be able to step away from my full-time job, or I want to make this more sustainable. I want to build my classes. I want to teach workshops. I want to work with one-on-one clients. So I think it's an interesting dynamic that we're still navigating, and I think it's quickly changing. I think as things have gone online, we've seen a lot of really quick changes in the yoga industry with Instagram, with online classes. And I think that's not going to stop. I think we'll see more and more of that. And so we'll have to evolve and adjust with those things that come up.
Oh, that's a really interesting thought. How do you see that evolution on, specifically on online classes, which I have a bit of a nervous issue with?
Yeah, I think that's a valid thought, though. You know, something that's been so like we talked about in the very beginning, that's been very much student to teacher, individual work, highly customizable and highly focused. The idea then of moving online can feel almost in direct conflict with some of those things that we've learned about the delivery of yoga. And certainly it can feel almost like it is a step further towards this modernization that takes us away from what we originally thought of as the connection around yoga and the way that it's been received and delivered in the past. I think that there's going to be, though, more and more online yoga that we see in the form of group classes that are being taught to live and recorded audiences, things like Yoga Glow and YouTube channels. I think there'll be more and more Skype sessions between private clients as people are starting to really take to this idea of wanting a customizable approach, but not necessarily having the ability to work with a private yoga teacher or even a yoga therapist in their area. And I think in a lot of ways we'll have to jump over hurdles around this and how to make sure that there is still quality being delivered. But I also think it could really open up a lot of doors, especially for teachers who have very specific focuses, like working with seniors particularly, things that are more on the therapeutic spectrum, teachers that are looking to build more global audiences so they can do things like retreats or reach people privately around the globe. So I think there's a lot of benefit to it, but I also think that there's going to be some kinks that we need to work out, like technological things that come up. And again, getting back to that question of how do we reach the person in front of us in a way that's personable and customizable, even if it's beyond private yoga and it's group offerings or workshops and webinars and things like that.
Oh, really interesting about where yoga is going. I hadn't put it together like you have, but I certainly think you have some really valid points about where we've been and where we might be going. So, yeah, I'll have to think about that. I'm sure I could come up with a lovely question later, but
one of the things I have noticed in the online space is that as quickly as it seems like we're moving, the yoga industry also moves a little bit kind of behind the times. So we're moving quickly, but if we look at yoga versus other industries, we actually are a couple steps behind in a lot of ways. And so that I think is a little promising because I think it's given other industries some time to work out some of those kinks. So as we step into more of the digital space, we have kind of pushed through some of those initial kinks, like doing things live and Instagram and social media and things like this. But I also think that the biggest thing we'll struggle with is that connection piece, is staying true to the intention of making this a wellness-based practice for the modern person, which does unfortunately or fortunately require us to be digital, since so much of what we do now connects us through technology, but also can disconnect us through technology. So it's really, it's quite an interesting concept that yoga plays into this. And I think we'll continue to see that. And for better or for worse, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yes, probably. Almost everything is.
Yes.
What's your opinion on how to build that disconnect how to build the connection, shall we say, because of the kind of inherent disconnection of online type teaching?
I think this ties back to, again, the work of private yoga and why it's something that I've been such an advocate for and what I focused my business around, both serving clients one-on-one, but then also developing a training and a book around why this is such a fruitful part of the yoga teacher journey. And I think that if we can come back to this concept that what we're offering is really distilled down to being of value to one person. And whether that is actually a one-on-one session, whether that is us offering that lesson to somebody physically in front of us or through a computer screen, or if it's us writing an email to our email list, but we're really writing it to that one person. Or again, another digital example, if we're posting something on Instagram, but we're really thinking about who it is that we're speaking to. I think that ties us back to what our why is and why we're putting this out there at all. But then also the concept that we're still really just talking at the end of the day to one person on the other end, whether that's literally the one person or it's the one person who's scrolling through their phone and listening to this podcast or looking at that Instagram feed or popping up in the Facebook group. And when we stay true to that, even if the audience grows to be, massive in size or really diverse, then we're still connected to our ultimate intention, and that comes through every time.
Okay. All right. Nice answer. I like that. Okay. So let's get back to private one-on-one classes. First of all, how do you recommend finding private clients?
Yes, this is the most popular question that I get, and I love it.
Yeah.
because it's a business question. So we want to understand how to get more private clients, and I think that starting here is always great because although it's a business question, I think it really does start back before the business stuff. So one of my passions is obviously the business side of things, in addition to the yoga teaching, certainly. But when we can tie business stuff back to yoga things, I think that there's more resonance. I think that some of the fearful feelings or the anxiety we can have around business that a lot of us do have, either because it's brand new or we feel like maybe some uncertainty about how much we really want business to be weaved and woven into what we're doing as yoga teachers, it can squash a little bit of that and help us realize that business and finding more clients really translates to us being able to be of value to more people. And the same with selling, essentially, is that the more people that we're able to serve, the more money we can make, the more sustainable this becomes, and then we can make this our living and we can do our life's work in a way that is going to be able to be long-term and we're able to be fully available for our clients. So when we look at business like that, it's super exciting, which brings us back to how we find clients, which is all about figuring out what it is that you offer and the value around what it is that you can put out there into the world when it comes to private lessons. So everybody has a really unique set of skills and expertise that they can put out there that they are able to market as a skill set and as a way of how they work privately with clients. If your specific skill set is that you're really skilled around working with seniors and you help them through specific hurdles like building balance and increasing or maintaining mobility and really helping them be in an optimal movement for their age and for where they are in their life, then that is exactly the value that you have to offer. And what you need to start doing is attracting people towards you that you can deliver upon that value in a way that might be initially more group based. But then the long game is inviting people to work with you individually. There's plenty of examples here. So if your demographic isn't seniors and maybe it's something a little bit more specific, like you help people get out of chronic back pain, or it's even more broad than seniors, like you help people create a home practice, you can still begin to distill down the value of what you offer in terms of what potential outcomes somebody can have. And once you have that nailed down, you're able to take that out into the world and start teaching around that. So you can teach group classes, you can teach workshops, you can start to partner up with other agencies and professionals in your area, whether that's in person locally or whether that's digitally. Again, I want to keep the conversation open since I know a lot of people are interested in moving more online. Then you can start to attract people who fit into that box, if you will, to what you're doing. And then they can see the value in what you offer. And then eventually they stair-step their way into working with you one-on-one.
Okay. All right. So basically it's just a true marketing sales funnel, which you find what you do and then you try to attract those people until they come in and start with whatever series of offerings you have. But it was said very well. I think people would understand it, that you do have to be out there offering what you've got, or it's not going to happen, especially if you want sustainability, which is difficult, I think.
Absolutely. And especially when we're talking about the higher tiered offerings, like anything that costs over $5, in the yoga industry right now, you can jump on YouTube and get yoga for free. You can take a $5 drop-in class at the yoga studio up the street. So we're contending then with really low cost offerings. And these don't necessarily mean that they're not valuable offerings, but they're different. And so part of our work then has to be differentiating private lessons, not just on financial ground, which tends to be easier for us to do. Like, well, it costs, this much per lesson or this much for the package. But it's beyond that. We really need to be able to talk about and speak to the value and the potential outcomes that somebody can have through working one-on-one with a experienced yoga teacher that they are not going to be able to get right away. Maybe they can long-term get some of the results of working from, the privacy of their home to a YouTube video or by going to a class once a week for $5. But there's magic that happens when there's an individual teacher working with an individual client. And we have to be able to speak to not only generally what that is, but also specifically what that is. And then stair-step people in that direction, like you said. And I love the words marketing funnel. Because we shouldn't be afraid to use, words like that. It's really, marketing, like we already talked about, is going to mean a larger reach. And that means that there's plenty of opportunity for us to work with people who need our service. And then that equates to us being able to make money doing this work and reaching more people. So all of that is good. But one of the biggest barriers we face as private yoga teachers is knowing and understanding the value of what we do and then being able to translate that to potential customers and could be clients in a way that helps them understand why they would do private yoga lessons over those YouTube videos or over those group classes or in addition to.
All right. Okay. Yeah, it's that second part that's hard, I think, is translating your value in a way that makes it obvious or at least acceptable, shall we say, because it's hard to sometimes do that, I think, when there's so many yoga teachers around. So you have to be really, really clear on what you're offering that's really unique and different.
Yes, and helping, doing some deep work as well around what you want to be offering. Because I know for me, I initially was really caught up in what other people were doing. And so a lot of what I was doing was kind of carbon copying what other people were doing that I had deemed successful. So it's really easy when, as newer teachers especially, I think, to come out and see what others are doing and think that we need to be this, do this kind of flavor of teaching, or we need to model this type of business because that looks like it's successful. And on the outside, we really don't know what is going on behind the scenes for somebody in their business, first of all. But on a bigger note, that really takes away the value that we have, and it takes away our confidence, which is a huge piece of being able to stand in your own light as a teacher and be able to step fully into that and be open to the fact that it's going to evolve and change. And where you end up is never where you imagine. And that's part of yoga. That's part of the journey that we step into as practitioners, but also as yoga entrepreneurs.
Yes, I think that's very true. I think it takes a long time because yoga is so diverse and holistic that, okay, you can get the asanas down, but then you have to work into pranayama, and then you work into meditation, and then you start on the yamas and the niyamas and the kleshas, and all of that just doesn't come overnight. At least it certainly didn't to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it really is a learning experience for yourself. I agree, and a learning experience as a teacher. And you really do, if you truly want it to be sustainable, I think, have to have that learning experience in the business area too. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. I brought it up, but that you put that in your website. That all three of those things are really important, and they truly are. So I think you have an excellent message there, and I want to congratulate you, because I've run into teachers who say, "Oh no, we're not here for money," and all of that, and I'm going, "Well, are you here for eating?" Because it's hard. It's really hard if you don't put the time and effort into the business edge.
Yes, and I love the parallels that happen between who we are as practitioners and how it unfolds for us as teachers and also as business owners, because I think that the same thing is true. Like the first layer unfolds, and I think if we can look at business like that instead of trying to shoot to the very end where this dream of sold out this and sold out that and making tons of money and all these followers and being able to leave our corporate job and things like this, then we lose a lot of beauty along the way, but we also lose the opportunity to evolve and grow into ultimately what we'll become. I think the other thing, I just want to tie back to what you said about teachers who are not necessarily feel like they're in it for the money, or like they're not needing to make money. I think that this is part of the imbalance that we have in the yoga industry. So I just want to touch on it for a moment, because I think this is really common, that at the beginning of our practice as yoga teachers, we think things like that. Like I might not be in this for the money, or, this is a hobby. I have a full-time job, or I have other streams of income, or, I pay my bills in other ways, so I don't need to make money. And so this becomes an excuse for us to devalue what we're doing. And it doesn't just affect us in the long run, but it also can affect the industry. So even if you enter the yoga workforce, if you will, and you step forward and you're teaching classes and workshops and things like that, even if you don't need the money, I think we still all have a responsibility to be charging what is value-based for what we're offering. So that way we're overall elevating the industry instead of just focusing on getting experience or doing it for free. And I'm not talking about more like Seva-based stuff where we're teaching to different demographics that maybe cannot invest financially. And so part of what we're doing is giving some time and some energy and effort to that population. But an overall sweeping generalization that we don't need to take ownership over what we're charging can be really detrimental to our long-term approach to being in business as a yoga entrepreneur, but it also can just impact the industry as a whole. So I try to encourage people to think about that as a holistic idea instead of kind of a get out of free jail card around having to set prices and think about money mindset and do some of that hard stuff that comes up when you're starting out as a teacher and needing to set prices and needing to do some of that financial stuff that can feel a little bit challenging and difficult and easy to turn away from.
Yep, I agree. But I hadn't thought of that, actually, that it really does, well, I suppose it trickles up to the yoga industry as a whole as to what is valuable about yoga. And of course, money is one way to determine value, and there's other ways too. But I really think it's important that the money value be recognized because it's just, it really stops people from being able to want to do what they want with their life if they really can't make a living from it. And there's lots of good yoga teachers, I think, who have stopped because of that. So, well, Kate, this has just been a wonderful discussion. I loved it. I kind of hope that you think you got your thoughts out. But I want to really tell people how to contact you about what you have to offer. Like we said earlier, Kate has a course on how to become a sustainable private yoga teacher with private clients, and she also has a book. So if you want to explore either one of those, you should go to Kate's website, which is Kate Connell, which is CONNELL, Potts, all one word, @.com. And she also has a free training for attracting more private clients, and that's also on that website. And she also has a Facebook community for private yoga. So teachers on Facebook at kateconnellpotts.com/community. And also on facebook.com/groups/private yoga teachers, all one word. So any of those will get you to Kate to help you explore the private yoga world a little more. And Kate, I really want to thank you. It was a fascinating discussion, and I love the thought of how what we're doing affects the whole industry. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful interview. Now for the listeners. To be part of changing the face of yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies, please take a picture of yourself doing your favorite yoga pose and email it to ctfoy@yogalikeness, all one word, .com.au. That is ctfoy@yogalikeness.com.au with your first or full name. I will upload it to the Instagram folder, Changing the Face of Yoga. So we will have an album of the spectrum of students who represent the face of yoga. Please download and review this podcast and tell your friends who might be interested. Thank you, and let's get together next week.